Michael, great to see you here at
Thanks,
ConnectOne
Frank.
Bank. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Oh my God,
today.
extraordinary operation you have here, facility. It's amazing.
So tell me, just why don't we start off? So tell me, how do you feel when you walk into ConnectOne Bank, and is it what you would think of when you walk into?
No, it does not look like a bank. I don't know if that's
That's a compliment.
Yeah. Okay. Good. It feels like I am in a. I don't want to say it's a combination of a WeWork and a really cool hotel lobby, and like my fantasy of what my office would look like. Couches, it's casual, everybody's standing, mulling around. It's really, really cool. A lot of glass, which I love. Could be an Apple store. How about that?
That's a great compliment.
And I mean it. It's really great.
So you've always had an affinity with real estate. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us just a little bit about, you were in the real estate business,
Yep.
involved, you were PR for real
Yep.
estate business,
Yep.
and now, you're doing, it was News Funnel, which
Yeah.
was a news
Yeah.
source, and
Yeah.
now today it's
Got a
more
lot of stuff going on.
technology.
Yeah, it's hard for me to
So
keep
why
track
don't you give
of.
us a little bit of
Okay,
a
so
timeline?
quickly. So my background was I started a public relations firm in my early 20s. My niche happened to be real estate because I didn't really know anything about any other industries, and I knew some people in real estate, and I built up my firm to specialize in real estate over about 25 years or so. And we became a fairly sizable firm. We had about 4 offices across the country: Jersey, New York, DC, and San Francisco. And it was a pretty big practice. So we had developers, brokerage firms, contractors, about 70, 80 employees. And then I eventually decided to exit the business and get into the technology sector, which I've been doing for the last 5 years or so.
That's great.
I really, as an entrepreneur, a fellow entrepreneur like you, was not afraid or intimidated about starting over, and I really wanted to start from the ground up into something I didn't really know much about, which was technology. And I thought that the commercial real estate industry particularly, and the multifamily sector, was going to at some point really embrace technology. But I knew it was early, and I knew that I had the stamina to build a long-term business. So my first business was the News Funnel, which is a news aggregator distribution of everybody else's news. That's growing incredibly well. We're up to about 150,000 subscribers on that. And then we've pushed into another site called CREtech.com, which we hold events bringing together startups in the real estate industry. So my whole life today is about connecting startups and the real estate industry.
You were talking about your transition over time
Yes.
in the tech space, so and you really well described where you are today, but where do you see the future?
So in terms of technology, so it's still very, very, very early, as you know better than anyone. So I would say we're still, to use like a sports acronym, we're still in the first or second inning of the commercial real estate industry embracing technology. And there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why it's taking so long, and that's for another conversation, but it's starting to embrace and infiltrate the industry, and it's happening, as you eloquently described, where there's friction. So it's happening in aspects of the business that are very archaic, that were paper-driven, like appraisals. It's happening in some online platforms to help market products and services. It's happening in, it's not really happening in the banking sector yet for the real estate industry. It's not really happening so much in transactions. It's happening like in efficiency aspects of the business, but it's starting to infiltrate. One of the really interesting trends that's happening is the very, very large brokerage firms and developers are starting to invest in startups. And that is starting to help the industry gain some traction. So some of the biggest names in the industry are now the biggest investors.
Well, we're seeing that in banking too, right? We're seeing some of the largest financial institutions are making investments in small fintech players to gain their technology and then incorporate it in what they're doing. So I guess I would say it's a very similar, type of investment cycle.
Right.
People thought for a while that fintech was going to displace the banks, and that's not exactly what's happening. And I would assume the same is happening here. These larger real estate firms, right, are seeing they need an infusion for their future, and they're going to look to these real estate tech players.
It's exactly right. I'm sorry, just on that point, Frank, it's exactly what you've done at the bank. It's figuring out how to use technology to become best in class in your particular niche in the real estate industry, to give you a competitive advantage, just as ConnectOne has done by so embracing technology. It's given you this market leadership position. It's one of the, I think, the cornerstones of your bank, right? Is how much emphasis you place on technology to help your customers. And I think the same thing is starting to happen in the real estate space. That's what the bigger firms are starting to recognize, that they can compete better. And what they have to do, though, is they have to invest. So that's what a lot of them are doing. So at our event, which thankfully you'll be there, and you're a wonderful partner for us at our big event, December 7th in New York, our CREtech.com event. You'll see on the panels, you'll see some of the largest brokerage firms, CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield, Jones Lang LaSalle, Colliers, Newmark, their technology officers talking about how they're investing in technology. And then you'll see some of the largest landlords like Hines and SL Green talking about the same thing. And there's no wonder then why they're best in class, because they're starting to invest. So just as you are.
Yep. So getting down a little bit more granular, maybe, what specific technology are you seeing, or is there anything exciting that you're seeing for building owners? Is it through app development that we're starting to see change? Are people paying their rent differently? We talked about our friends at Bowery, how an appraisal is being put together, but what are you seeing for landlords and building owners?
Right, it's a great question. So I spend my days talking to startups and talking to building owners, so I think I have a good handle on what's going on. So a couple things that's going on. First thing is, landlords are figuring out that they need to be better communicating with their tenants in their buildings. Okay? So they're using and developing apps that let the residents or the tenants communicate when they've got a maintenance issue, when there might be an emergency issue in the building, when maybe there's a yoga class or a party within the space. So within the building, communication now is a very, very big feature. And again, just like the bank with its customers, focusing on how to put the customers first. So that's a big part of this, number one. Another really big part is that the landlords are looking at is data. And again, it's very similar to what you've been doing. So never before have the landlords and the owners have had access to so much data, not only within their building, but within the marketplace. So there's a lot of very successful companies like VTS or Honest Buildings or Reonomy that are focused on giving landlords data to make the best possible decisions they possibly can. So that's another a big segment. And then I think one of the other areas is also in data within the building and construction process. So there's a wonderful site called Envelope, which you could use that app, and if you're going to do new construction, which I know you know a heck of a lot about, and you want to know what the permitted allowance is for that building, what you can do, how many stores for the various usages. I can build a retail, I can build an office. On that app, you can do that instantaneously because there's all that data in there. So I think what it is, Frank, it's giving the landlords and the building owners more information and more tools to, again, everything that you talk about, speed, efficiency in the process.
So there's been a lot of talk in the news lately about virtual reality. Where do you see that playing a role in real estate, whether in sales or in other parts of the business?
Well, how do I know you're really here? Maybe this is really. Maybe we are in virtual reality.
We're in the Matrix
right now. Maybe we're in the Matrix right now. Oh no, you're here. Okay. So I think VR right now is gaining popularity in marketing. So I think a lot of builders are using VR as a way to market their space and figure out also that you don't have to go through, again, like you were talking before when we had our conversation, you don't have to drive to a building to inspect it anymore. And that was a very archaic process. I mean, you've done that with your locations that you've expanded to, right? You have to go look at it, tour it. VR is being increasingly used as a way, well, I could just look at the space on my phone, on my desktop. So I think there's it's gaining traction.
It's
That's a
fabulous.
good thing.
It's fabulous. Two things I can't help, but I'm not sure they're exactly related to this. But what do you think about WeWork's taking over Lord and Taylor's location? On
So WeWork is a sponsor of ours. So I love WeWork. I think it's obviously they're a topic of conversation sort of everywhere you go. I was in Boston today, and WeWork is expanding in Boston significantly. We had an event recently in San Francisco. WeWork is expanding in San Francisco. Obviously in New York, they're ginormous. I think they're brilliant in the sense that they've really pioneered that category. That's why I said your space kind of feels like a WeWork and the energy. So I think that,
but not really. I mean, there were firms that
they like
preceded
Regis
them,
and some other ones, but I think what they figured out was the vibe, the energy. That's what's about your energy in your facility. There's an energy there. When you go into a WeWork, it's very cool. They figured out the programming. They figured out the flexibility. Now there's definitely competition now. There's a lot of companies that are doing that now. I just think that they have so many resources available to them that they're expanding so aggressively. We live, and they're in residential, they're in exercise now. So I think they've kind of created a category. I don't think that they're going to replace developers. I don't think that they're going to replace the need for long-term office space in a very sort of structured corporate environment. But I think for a certain segment of the population, they fit really well. And I think it also remains to be seen what this millennial generation how they're going to approach tenancy, right? Like what they're going to do. I mean, this is a generation also that probably is not going to be buying cars. So will they?
That brings up my next question,
boy.
which is, what do you think of the first Airbnb apartment building?
I think the whole concept is fascinating. I love Airbnb. I think it's a great company. I've studied them a lot. So I think it's real. I think they're on to great things. I think the other thing that I'm very interested and fascinated with is, I want to get your opinion. What do you think about, I'll turn the tables. What do you think about driverless cars?
So I think it's a fascinating technology, and it's hard to understand, but the one part that keeps rubbing me is the fact, and this applies to real estate, the fact that your vehicle is only utilized 5% of the time. So you're buying an asset for 5% utilization. And this economy today and the technological revolution that we're in will not allow that to occur in the future. And it's the same thing. Think about your home, your apartment, things that you own that you're only using a percentage of the time. I think there's going to be a better way to do those things, and we're going to go through an incredible revolution going forward. And so I think the natural progression is, with technology, driverless cars will be the future, and you won't own a car in the future. It'll be a service, an on-demand service.
Yes. Are you sure you're a banker? I think he's like you're a tech guy. You know more than me.
I started off saying it's not going to happen because how could you have I'm thinking about Manhattan streets, and I'm thinking about how could you have a driverless car making its way around Manhattan. And I happened to listen to a podcast about transportation in general, and one of the things that was resounding was if you went back 100 years ago, those streets were occupied mostly by horses, and when the car came out, people were really concerned because cars were hitting horses and killing horses. They said, so the two can't exist. Well, where are we today?
Right.
How many horses do you see on the street? Not so many. And so I believe we will figure out how to allow for that technology to take place. It may not be next year, but it will be sooner than most people think.
Well, you're 100% right, and you got this before me. So we had an event in LA 2-3 weeks ago just on driverless cars. And not that I was skeptical, I was just a little ignorant about it, right? And so the CEO of Gensler, I think the biggest architect firm in the country, gave this presentation. And I got to tell you, there's 300 people there. People's jaws were dropping. And everybody was taking notes because when he went through, as you said, what's going to happen to the streets, what's going to happen to the parking garages, what's going to happen to that parking lot, what's going to happen to your apartment building, and it's real, and it's coming, and it's 5 to 10 years probably, and trucks are going to come first. It's probably in my career, and you have the building experience, I don't, in terms of development. It's the most profound change that I think I would have seen in my career in real estate in terms of that technology, because
Yeah,
it's
I
coming. And the other thing, like you said, I think the other thing about your car is apparently that other statistic is that most of the distances are like you use your car. It's like a mile or two. It's not even that you use your car that much. And again, this next generation, I don't think they're going to own cars.
A lot of them don't today.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Frank. I love
Really
the bank.
appreciate it.
ConnectOne.